This is Tom Alston from Aero Marine Tax Professionals. I specialize in helping people who are buying aircraft and using them in and out of California, whether they're California residents or not, and legally avoiding the sales tax. We are experts at documentation and making sure that you have a deep enough level of documentation to support whatever you're claiming as a business expense. But you also know that the federal government has just authorized the hiring of 87,000 IRS agents. Who are they coming after? They're not going to go after the people making $50,000 to $75,000 to $100,000 a year, because they know from experience that if they go after those people, they're not going to find enough revenue to justify the salaries. They also are not going to go after the 6 or 7 million millionaires in the United States, because they suspect that they have the wherewithal to hire someone to teach them how to do the proper kind of documentation. In the United States, there's 31.5 million small businesses. 25 million of those are solopreneurs, people who are working by themselves. In that category, if you own an airplane and you're claiming it and you're using it in your business, they're coming after you. Why? Because they know, not suspect, they know that the level of understanding that most of you have relative to the level of documentation that they can require, maybe they haven't in the past, but they can change what they do, that they're going to find revenue. So my company is an expert in teaching you how to document things and how to substantiate the business purpose for everything that you do. During an interview several years ago, I predicted what the government is doing now, and I want you to see that stuff now, because maybe it will answer some of your questions. So please take a few minutes to enjoy the videos that I made for you.
I want to tell you about something that's coming. So this is an opportunity for you to see something over the horizon. So I'm kind of warning you. You can decide whether you trust my 20 years of experience of always doing this or not. And it's all based around a word called contemporaneous. So I'm going to read the definition out of a dictionary. Happening in the same period of time. And it's part of the word contemporary. So it's belonging to the present time. Okay? And how that is important to you is this. I see all of the taxing agencies requiring that you be able to support that the documentation was collected in real time when it actually happened. Because if you're going to use emails as documentation, it has a timestamp on it. So instead of letting you bring a bunch of receipts in a shoebox and assembling it all later and then going back and getting penalty of perjury statements, or going back, and it's my recollection, you know, in that period of time we had this meeting, it's a little weaker. And all the taxing agencies are going to begin to attack you now and in the future on the fact that you're giving them self-serving documents. Well, of course it's self-serving. A tax plan or a tax program or all of your documentation is self-serving, because you're trying to legally avoid, or in the cases of IRS, mitigate your taxes. So if anyone says to you that's self-serving, just say, of course it is. You know, that's the answer to it. But the point that I'm trying to make to you is that instead of having to go through your receipts as you prepare your tax return and go back and get penalty of perjury of statements from people, or people agreeing that they met you on a certain date for to verify the business use of your aircraft, because we're primarily talking about business aviation here, collect it in real time, timestamp it, do it with your emails. Now, I'm going to give you, in the future, I'm going to give you lots of things, lots of advice about how to use words that are in these emails. But the thing that you need to remember is that taxing agencies are going to begin to require that you provide contemporaneous documentation. Aero Marine has always provided quality control of a client's documents, and they've always been done in a contemporaneous manner, which means that we collect the documentation from you, and currently we're doing it on a monthly basis, okay? If we have to tick that up to daily, we'll do it that way. Whatever the taxing agency requires to get through their audit process. We have always been focused on doing just one thing: California use tax, transactions taxes. So whenever an aircraft owner has been attacked by the state of California for their use taxes, we provide a service where we tell them what to collect, and then every month we have them email the copies of all of their documentation to us, so that we provide a quality control process of it. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail than what you've actually asked. We look at the aircraft logs. And you may ask, why look at aircraft logs? They're just, I can just take pictures of it. I'll tell you why you can't do that. Because typically, because the aircraft logs are not quality controlled by anyone in the past, you don't care whether the airport designators are correct, whether they match up with your fuel receipts or not. So what we do is you send us a copy of your logs, and then I have one of my internal consultants input all that stuff into an Excel spreadsheet. I had a guy complain about that. I could save so much money if you just let me do that. No, because you'll duplicate the mistakes. Okay, we're quality controlling it. We're acting just like the tax agency. We're going to pick through it and look for a reason to make your event taxable. But instead, we let you know where the mistakes are. So you have an opportunity. It's just math, but we have an opportunity for you to fix that. So we look at the airport designators. We also look at your flight durations for each flight, because it's not uncommon that they don't match. If you take an hour and a half to fly someplace, and then you fly back and it only takes you a half hour, a tax auditor who has no reality of headwinds and that kind of stuff is going to question that. So we look at that and we ask you about it. Oh, I just wrote down the wrong numbers is generally the answer. Or I ran into such a headwind that I really wasn't moving. Okay, but make notes of that. We need that. The tax agencies are going to start to ask for it. That kind of stuff. And then we also match up all of your fuel receipts with all of your landings. An aircraft log is actually an index to a piece of fiction, because there isn't anything to stop you from sitting down and writing up the aircraft log 5 minutes before you turn in the audit. Everyone knows that. You know it. You're smiling when I say that, okay? And it's the only way that you take that index to a piece of fiction and turn it into an index to a work of nonfiction is by providing the fuel receipt, showing that you actually landed. Because when you buy fuel, typically you get a receipt that has a date, a location, and a tail number on it. So that's how you take this aircraft log and you make it real to the tax auditor. So we do that. We check and make sure all those things match up. Secondarily, if you're doing business aviation, we quality control all of your business support. And that's a constantly evolving and changing requirement by any agency, and I guarantee it's going to happen with the IRS too. All right, so we have to quality control that stuff, because people will, if you go back to an earlier article of mine about dry, cryptic, and boring, there's so much social stuff that you put into this. Remember, you need to remember that the tax auditor who's reviewing your tax package is trying to charge you the tax. So leave all that social stuff out of the emails. George, we met on this day and we talked about this day. Leave out, well, we sat with our wives, we drank cigars, we went hunting moose, we went fishing, because they're looking for reasons to make your event taxable. You have to understand the danger you're in. One viewpoint. And the other viewpoint is the contemporaneous nature. If you have all that stuff being evolved in real time, and emails are time-stamped, whether you recognize that or not, you need to understand all that. Make sure that the stuff meets all of the requirements. So that is what we do. But I also realized that we can do things for people who are not being audited by the state of California for sales and use tax, because it's the same process. So if you're an aircraft owner anywhere who has required to file an IRS tax return, anywhere, I'm going to say inside the United States, because I don't know of anyone who's filing an income tax return with the U.S. who's not a U.S. resident, but I won't be surprised to find out that it occurs. We'll do the same for you, okay? You send us your aircraft logs, your fuel receipts, and we've already talked about why that stuff needs to be quality controlled. We're kind of like your conscience sitting on your shoulder. We've told you how to do it. What we're going to do is we're going to try to ride along with you, so that goes back to the contemporaneous word, and be able to quality control that stuff in as close to real time as possible, okay? And we're going to look at the logs, make sure that all that documentation makes sense. We're going to look at the fuel receipts, making sure that it matches up with the aircraft logs. We're also going to review your business documentation to make sure that it's pure and clean and matches up to those flights. So it's a pretty simple process. Generally, we can do this in 1 to 2 hours a month, and we use our billing rate, our lowest billing rate for that, so it's not very expensive. And you have to weigh that against, do I want to be ready for the attack? So if you're buying a $20 million jet, and you're writing it off and you're going through all of these things, you want to make sure that you have a plan on how to deal with it. And that goes back to the contemporaneous. My thoughts are, at this point, if you prove to the IRS that you're doing a good job of recording all of this stuff and keeping track of it, you stand a pretty good chance of surviving your audits. I've talked to a couple of people, aviation attorneys, recently, and asked them, are many people being audited on this business and entertainment disallowance that it came into existence in, I think it was a Jobs Creation Act of 2005? And they said quite a few. How many of the audits are being found not in the taxpayer's favor? And the estimation almost flabbergasted me. Almost half of these people, they're getting all or most of their aircraft deductions disallowed because they don't know how to properly fill out all this paperwork. So we can, if you want us, set up a system for you to track the proper documents for that. That'll be a little bit of work. We'll send you some forms that you have to fill out on a flight-by-flight basis, and you can decide right now not to do that, but I guarantee you that when you get audited, you wish you had. I have some great news for you. Aero Marine historically has been known as someone who does tax exemption processes relative to the attack by the state of California on their sales and use tax transactions. I'm announcing today, and you're getting to hear it for the first time, that we now have a process that's going to assist all N-registered, U.S.-registered aircraft that are being used for business. Okay? The new program is called Verify. The foundation of that program is extremely similar to what we already do, but I just realized in some discussions with aviation attorneys where I discovered that these IRS audits are being failed 50% of the time, that I can help you guys too, okay? And Verify is the name of that program. We're going to give you a list of documents that you're going to send to us on a monthly basis, and every month we're going to review those to determine that your logs match up with your fuel receipts, to determine that the entries that you have on the flight logs make sense. Remember that the IRS wants your money. Remember that you're part of the 1% if you own an aircraft and you're under attack. Regardless of who's in the administration, you're still under attack by the IRS. Never forget that. If you think I'm kidding, think about how easy it was to get a 501c3 if Tea Party was in the name of your 501c3. They don't follow whether the president or the Congress is a conservative or a liberal. The IRS is after you. exactly after you. So we've created this program that is just like our program that produces 100% success. It's a different focus because the IRS requires you in business aviation to maintain that on an annual basis, more than 50% of your flight hours are for a business purpose. Okay? We can control that. We can look at what you're doing. We can give you a heads up if you're starting, your percentages are get too low. So it's a valuable, valuable service, and I strongly recommend that you give us some consideration. And we're doing exactly what we've been doing for all people that I will call California targets, okay? It's exactly the same process. The only difference is the threshold and where we want to wind up. Let me tell you how this program is going to work. You're going to engage us. Then you're going to take copies of your flight logs, copies of your fuel receipts, copies of your maintenance documents, and copies of, we'll start with the smallest program, of just your business support, and you're going to email them to me. I'm going to take your documentation and assign it to one of my tax consultants, and she's going to take the step of inputting your aircraft logs into an Excel spreadsheet, just so that we can check and make sure that your math is okay. And we find in logs about 75-80% of the time there's some form of mathematical error, or the airport designator on the log doesn't match up with the fuel receipt. We're going to take all the weaknesses out of that. We generally can do that between 1 and 2 hours a month, so it's not very, very expensive. If there's anything else that you want us to collect for you, because our end goal is at the end of the year, the taxable year, we're going to create a system for your CPA or your finance department. We're going to send them all these documents collected by month, quality controlled, and they can use that to file your federal tax returns. I do not want to take any work away from your CPA. I want to make his life simple, and I want to be your conscience. I want to be the person that's helping you to create this discipline to collect this stuff, because if you think the IRS is going to reduce its pressure on you, you're wrong.
So please give us a call. Give me a call. The number is 916-691-9192. Don't be one of the many taxpayers who unjustly enriches the government because you're uninformed. Thank you.